No true crime podcast is complete without a visit to the crime scene. In this episode, that's exactly what I do. My name is Patricia Nunan, and this is Who Killed Haing Ngor? It's February 2024, and we're in Chinatown. The Chinatown in Los Angeles. It's a hilly area, and you can see downtown LA below us in the distance. This is where Haing Ngor was living at the time of his murder. We've come to the scene of the crime. I'm with a friend of mine, Doug Niven. We first met in Phnom Penh in the 1990s, and Doug's a Cambodia head too. I mean, he probably knows even more Cambodia minutiae than I do. Doug doesn't like to talk on tape, but he's here. We've come to meet a lawyer. But let's just start. Doug and I have come to 945 Beaudry, and we're meeting. Do you prefer Michael?
Mike.
Mike Semanchik?
Yep.
And so why don't you introduce yourself?
Mike Semanchik. I'm the executive director of the Innocence Center, and I've been working on Jason Chan's case for over a decade.
The Innocence Center is exactly what it sounds like. It's a legal nonprofit dedicated to getting wrongfully convicted people released from prison. Jason Chan is one of their clients. He's the man that the police say fired the shots that killed Ngor while he and his two friends were allegedly mugging him. That's what they got convicted of. This is the first time I'm meeting Mike Semanchik in person. 945 Beaudry is Ngor's building. To me, it looks like a small motel. It's a long two-story building with about 8 apartments. You reach the second-floor apartments by taking stairs to an outdoor walkway which runs the length of the building, just like a motel. One of the narrow ends of the building faces an alley. That's where we're going. Carport is a word I'd never really heard before the Ngor case. Maybe it's a West Coast thing. Essentially, the second floor of Ngor's building is about 15 or 18 feet longer than the bottom floor, so residents park beneath that overhang, the far end of which is supported by some vertical beams. So do you happen to know, have they reconfigured the driveways or anything?
I don't know for sure. The last time I was here, like some of the apartment complexes have gates that don't allow you to get to the alley side, and others do. I'll let you walk through, and I don't know if that was the way it was back then, but I know the last time I was here, the walls that are in the alley were the same way they were on the night of the crime.
Right.
Which is an important detail.
Since that visit, I've looked at the crime scene photos that you can see on true crime TV shows. My own request through the Freedom of Information Act are still pending. There have been cosmetic improvements to the carport since 1996, but the layout, like the location of those beams or columns, the width of the alley, the wall near the carport, all of that is the same. There's another detail I want to add. Nearly everyone uses the word alley to describe the strip behind Ngor's building. It's actually more of a lane. It's wide enough for 2 cars, and a lot of people use it to access their buildings' carports or garages, the same as Ngor. On Google Maps, the alley actually has a name, which is Victor Heights, but that came about more recently. In 1996, before Google existed, and in the police and court documents, it was referred to as an alley. All of it is a hill, and it's long. It's about 296 meters, or 323 yards, measuring with Google Earth. You can see all these details on the episode webpage. Now, we're standing in what was Ngor's carport.
I want to say that this is the spot right here. And the reason why is because I remember thinking this column, which it was here that night as well, would have been a hard thing to get around, like something you would have to maneuver around.
Suddenly, I felt a real pang. I'd already spent a lot of time looking at the crime scene on screens and reading about it, and now I was in the actual place where Haing Ngor died. He's a minor legend in my press corps circles for his part in the killing fields, and, as I've said, the movie changed history. I admired him, and I still do. That's despite the many flaws I've learned about. So I felt the loss then and there. This was a spot where a human being died. I do feel like we should have brought flowers. Maybe we'll swing by with flowers or my next visit, assuming, but I do feel bad. Yeah.
We've been getting high in a somewhat abandoned laundry room in the house right next to Indra's since like noon that day. We had depleted our supply, and we had plans to go to Tak's house and ask his mom for some money.
These are the words of Jason Chan, but this is not his voice. I've gotten an actor to read text messages out loud. Jason Chan is one of 3 gang members who were arrested and later convicted of killing Ngor. His 2 friends were Indra Lim and Tak Sun Tan. They were members of the gang, the Oriental Lazy Boys. In 1996, Chan and Lim were 18 years old. Tan was 19. After getting high, Chan says, they were hanging around outside Indra's house at the very bottom of the alley. It was a regular hangout spot.
Indra's mom came out of the house and said she had received news that something had happened in the alley. She immediately told Indra to get in the house, and he did. That's when me and Tak made the decision to take a bus to his house.
Of the 3, Jason Chan is the only one still in prison. He was given life without parole because police said he was holding the gun. Lim served 22 years before he was released, and Tan served 26. The California Department of Corrections uses an app that allows inmates to text. They have tablets of some sort with limited internet access. You have to jump through some bureaucratic hoops to get permission to text with an inmate, and the texts are monitored. But by the time I visited the crime scene, I'd been texting off and on with Jason Chan for nearly a year.
I don't have any ideas on who might have actually committed the crime. There were a lot of theories being thrown around, but the detectives were so sure that they had the right people that everything else wasn't even worth looking into. They became one-track minded.
Let's pull back for a second. I want to recap what was going on in Ngor's life at the time of his murder. The Killing Fields came out in 1984, and Ngor won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor in early 1985. He was suddenly famous, and not just for the Oscar. People were enchanted by his rags-to-riches story, the refugee turned movie star. Ngor immediately began campaigning for international support for refugees who had fled to the border with Thailand because of Cambodia's ongoing civil war. Meanwhile, Ngor kept acting in Hollywood movies while he was living here in this modest building in Chinatown. Then in 1991, Cambodia's warring parties signed a peace deal, thanks in part to the impact of the Killing Fields. The country had been isolated for decades, but it began to open up. So Ngor started shuttling back and forth between LA and Cambodia's capital, Phnom Penh. He wanted to do humanitarian work and he wanted to invest. But he fell in with some dubious business partners and ran into serious financial trouble. We'll be coming back to that. Now let's fast forward. It's February 1996, 12 years after The Killing Fields was released. Ngor was in Phnom Penh, but he was called back to LA to do some post-production on a film he was in. Audio looping, to be precise. February 25th, 1996 was a Sunday. Ngor had spent the day with a close friend, who was also a distant cousin, watching sports on TV and hanging out. That friend took photos, which he later shared with the police. In the pictures, you can see that Ngor was wearing his Rolex watch. It had been a gift from Roland Joffe, the director of The Killing Fields. Ngor was also known to wear a gold chain with a pendant. You can't see either in the photos. If he was wearing them, they would have been under his sweater and shirt. In the early evening, Ngor left his friend's house in Long Beach and drove home to Chinatown. He drove a pale yellow Mercedes. That sounds fancy, but it was a beater, his friends have told me. It was a decade old. Let's go back to the carport with Mike Semanchik. I'm using a parked car as a stand-in for Ngor's. The night of the murder, there was another parked car immediately to the left of Ngor's, and it was a tight squeeze between them.
And so the prosecution's theory was that they saw that Haing Ngor was coming home and came up here and did a jack move on him and took the locket and the Rolex and left behind all the cash in the car.
Right, but so he parked, right?
He parked
so
here, in the carport.
he parked, and so then they would have approached from over here.
Right.
I know this is a little bit, it feels a little bit morbid to be doing this, but
Sure.
we'll say hypothetically this person's car.
Mm-hmm.
They approached here. He's still in the driver's seat.
Yeah. As he's pulled in and parked, I think at least the very first shot, I think he's still seated in his seat and perhaps maybe twists or moves in some direction, and that's when the second shot happens.
Ngor was shot twice, once in the thigh and once through the left side of his chest. Remember how I said that alley is one long hill that's just under 300 meters? Ngor's carport is about 80% of the way up the hill. The last 20% gets extra steep. I mean, it's close to a 45-degree grade. It's very steep. Again, you can see this on the episode webpage. There were no eyewitnesses to the shooting, but there were audio witnesses, people who heard the shots. One was a child who lived on the second floor of the building across the alley from Ngor's carport.
And then the perpetrator who fired the shots, according to 8 witnesses, one of which was an 8-year-old boy who was, I believe, living in one of these apartments just up above the carport here, said they heard a 4-cylinder car, likely loaded with a couple of people, fleeing up the hill, revving at super loud, as you would expect a 4-cylinder car looking at the steepness of this hill. And so from the moment that I first came to this scene and saw the steepness of the alley right behind where this carport is, and connected with the witnesses that had nothing to fear or to do with this, the fact that they talked about a car fleeing up the hill, to me meant the prosecution's theory doesn't make any sense.
The trial of Chan, Lim, and Tan was extraordinarily complicated. The 3 defendants were tried at the same time with 3 separate juries in the same courtroom. Witnesses testified and recanted more than half a dozen times. On top of that, the juries were never allowed to visit the crime scene. I've read the court transcripts, and I'm honestly surprised there wasn't a mistrial. Some witnesses from Asian communities didn't understand the difference between the words alley and street, so it's not clear they even understood some of the prosecution's questions. But there's something that stands out even more. The prosecution put on the stand several gang members. 2 of them were Timmy Krung and Varik Sarik. They testified that on the evening of Ngor's death, they'd been at the movies, and then they went over to Lim's house. That's where Chan, Tak, and Lim used to hang out down at the bottom of the hill. The prosecution alleges that when Timmy and Varik got to the alley, they witnessed the shooting. Then they saw the 3 defendants running down the hill. But there's a problem with that theory. It's simply not possible. In order to park in Ngor's carport, you have to make a 90-degree right-hand turn into a parking space. But there's a wall that sticks out toward the alley from the right, blocking the view of the carport. So without any exaggeration, you wouldn't be able to see if there's a free parking spot until you were a second or 2 away from turning. As an experiment, let's all 3 walk down the hill, and we're going to see at what point we can no longer see the car. Mm-hmm. So right now we're at what we believe was Dr. Ngor's parking spot, and we're going to walk one. It's just the angle. This wall that blocks view is probably 5 feet tall.
It's probably 5'6" by the time you're standing next to it.
Yeah, 5'6". I'm 5'5", so
it's an inch shorter than me.
Yeah. And so then you have to be
only 6 feet towards the city and you can't see.
Basically, if you're 6 feet down the hill from Ngor's carport, you can't see the parking spaces. You can't see the cars. That wall blocks your line of sight. Of course, the further you walk away downhill, a 5'4" wall appears to grow. It's 7 feet, 8 feet, 9 feet tall the further downhill you go. Unless someone was standing directly behind Ngor's car, there's no way they'd have witnessed the shooting. But now where do you think Timmy and Varik actually were?
Bottom of the hill.
Bottom of the hill. Bottom of the hill is like...
That's about 265 yards away, or more than 2.5 football fields, once again using Google Earth. The police narrative does not add up. Whether intentionally or not, Semanchik says the police detectives probably intimidated Timmy and Varik.
Once the prosecution was on to the theory that the boys did it, they continued to go back to collect statements from Timmy and Varik, and I think Timmy had given 7 different statements, and Varik gave 5 different statements, or vice versa, over the course of the investigation and all the way through the trial. Inconsistent in every respect. But at that point, I think the investigation was locked in. They had who they thought were good suspects, and they weren't willing to look elsewhere. So you take the information that doesn't add up and you ignore it. And you go with the information that you think does make sense, and you try to make it fit. And I think that's just what happened here.
He's more diplomatic than me. Let's go back to Jason Chan's version of events. They were hanging out at Indra's house getting high on rock cocaine. They were going to go to Tak's house to ask his mom for money to score more drugs. But Indra's mom had heard the commotion and made him stay home. He was 18. Chan was 18. Tak was 19. Timmy and Varik, the 2 gang members who were witnesses, were 26 and 24. To me, when you read the transcripts, it looks like the cops were gaslighting them, compelling them to change their stories on where and at what time they ran into Tak and Chan. So what does Jason Chan say happened after he and Tak made plans to go ask his mom for money when Lim had to stay home?
We walked down Indra Street, which is White Knoll Drive. At the bottom of the street, we ran into Timmy. We asked him for a ride to Tak's house. He said yes, but he had to go to Tol May's house to get his little brother first. Timmy turned into the alley so he could make a U-turn. And that's when we noticed the light, either from the ambulance or the police car, towards the upper part of the alley.
So Chan and his friends actually saw the emergency response to the murder as they were leaving. I asked Chan by text, if you were getting high down the road, didn't you hear gunshots?
We thought that we had heard something that resembled gunshots, but it was Chinese New Year, and we quickly dismissed it as someone celebrating by lighting firecrackers.
Chan also believes that the police bullied witnesses to support their narrative.
Somehow, after several interviews with the Los Angeles police officers, their stories started to warp into the version the detectives needed to make us their prime suspects. Now the story was that they picked us up at the mouth of the alley after hearing gunshots and us running from the scene of the crime. How convenient. That's just the beginning, though. The story changes 7 more times to fit what the detectives needed to even have a chance of convicting us.
The prosecutor, Los Angeles District Attorney Craig Hum, has declined my request for an interview. I'm also still waiting for my Freedom of Information Act requests for crime scene photos and other material previously shared with other members of the media. That request was initially rejected by the LAPD, and I'm appealing. Separately, I reached out to Detective Ed Yee. He was on the case in 1996 and is no longer with the LAPD. He's spoken to other media about the Ngor case as recently as 2023 or 2024. My request for an interview was rejected. The prosecution's entire case rests on one thing: the missing gold chain and pendant that Ngor was known to wear. A lot of people, including me, mistakenly refer to this at times as a locket. Technically, it's a pendant because it does not have a little door. There's a photo of it on the webpage. The pendant is a tiny gold frame holding an image of Ngor's late wife, Chan Mi Hui, printed on porcelain. She died in childbirth along with their baby in 1978. That was in Cambodia during the height of the Khmer Rouge. The pendant was not a gift from her. In fact, she never saw it. Despite the chaos of the Khmer Rouge period, Ngor managed to keep a photo of Hui. He had the pendant made in Thailand before he resettled in the U.S. These are details Ngor shared in his memoir, A Cambodian Odyssey. Let's take a brief detour here as long as we're on the subject of Ngor's family. He did have some surviving family, including 2 brothers. Haing Ngor was also a refugee who resettled in the U.S. Another, Chan Sarun, stayed in Cambodia. When he fled Cambodia, Ngor adopted his niece, Sophia, who was then about 10 years old. She had lost much of her nuclear family. Every reference I've read about Sophia refers to her as Ngor's niece, so that's what I'm going to go with. But it seems to me that if you're adopted when you're 10, that relationship is much more father and daughter. I happened to meet Sophia Ngor once at an event in New York City. Friends of mine were launching another Cambodia podcast about looted Khmer antiquities, and to my amazement, I recognized her in the audience. It was February 2023 and very early on with this project, but I approached her and asked if she'd like to take part. She and her husband were polite but distant. I had the impression that they got pretty tired of interview requests. And even though she gave me her phone number, she's never responded to any of my texts or calls. Sophia was just under 27 years old when her uncle was murdered. She was in Cambodia when it happened. I want to be respectful to her given the scale of her loss. Still, I definitely have some questions for her that I wish I could ask. Some weeks after the murder, Sophia asked the LAPD how she could get Ngor's gold chain and pendant back, presumably from the coroner's office. It was a family keepsake. Until that point in the investigation, the police had been stumped. This was LA, and an Academy Award-winning movie star, a beloved member of the Cambodian community, had been killed, and they had no leads. The prosecutor and detectives say as much in any number of the true crime TV shows littering basic cable. But a missing chain and pendant, a precious family keepsake? That gave police the narrative they needed. The Oriental Lazy Boys were known chain snatchers. Ngor was mugged, they said. He willingly handed over his Rolex, but he put up a fight for his chain and pendant, and for that, he was shot. So that became the police narrative.
An attorney, and especially a prosecuting attorney, the DA, is not allowed to make up evidence. Anything he says or argues has to be based on something that was introduced at court.
This is David Goodwin. He was the appellate attorney for Indra Lim in an appeal in the year 2000 that he actually lost. Still, he believes that LA prosecutor Craig Hum engaged in multiple counts of misconduct.
Haing Ngor was killed in his carport, and nobody saw the crime except the people who were there. Craig argued that the three gangbangers approached the car and they demanded Rolex. And they took the Rolex. Then they demanded the locket. And Haing Ngor could not give him the locket because it had the picture of his wife. And when he refused to give him the locket, they struggled and he was shot. Now, nobody saw that.
Not only were there no witnesses, there's no physical evidence whatsoever. Police never found a gun. They never found the missing Rolex. They never found the chain and pendant. They never found DNA or fingerprints linking Chan, Tak, or Lim to the crime scene. The killers also left Ngor's wallet behind, containing $2,900 in cash.
Craig Hum argued that the reason that Haing Ngor could not surrender the locket was that it had the only picture of his wife, which is not true. So that's fictionalizing.
He's right. I caught that too. In one of those true crime TV shows or documentaries, you can see a large frame print of Chan Mi Hui, the same image as the pendant, near the desk in Ngor's apartment. Presumably, he could have made a new pendant. To Goodwin, the prosecutor used her tragic death to manipulate jurors.
But now you're talking about dead babies. And sorry, a dead baby in Cambodia doesn't prove we robbed somebody in an alley in Chinatown.
After Ngor was killed, shockwaves ripped through LA's Cambodian community. Many leapt to the conclusion that he'd been assassinated by the Khmer Rouge. So too did some of the press. It's a conspiracy theory that I'm going to debunk in my next episode. Remarkably, his murder attracted a lot of investigative star power. The State Department, the FBI, the Secret Service were all focused on the case early on. We'll get into that later. But once the police settled on Chan, Tan, and Lim as their suspects, they did not investigate any other dimensions to the case, either foreign or domestic. What about that 4-cylinder car chugging up the last super steep part of the hill, past Ngor's carport? And if you can't see the chain and pendant in the photos of Ngor taken at his friend's house just before the murder, how would muggers even know to snatch it? There's another detail, and this one's kind of creepy. As the police investigated the crime scene, a stranger showed up at Ngor's building. He was Asian, well-dressed, and wearing glasses, but otherwise ordinary. He went from door to door, knocking. At each apartment, he asked, "Does my mother live here?" Even more strange, he knocked on every door except Ngor's. He skipped that one. Remember, this building resembles a motel with outside walkways to the apartments on both floors. So anyone who glanced in that direction could see this man. It's a bizarre detail that stood out to people. Imagine the scene. Red and blue lights are flashing and the police are all over the place because a neighbor, who was a local hero, had been shot to death. And some rando shows up, knocking on doors. Neighbors told police about that strange man. It's in the LAPD records. They also reported seeing a suspicious white car in the neighborhood in the weeks before the shooting. And remember that little boy, who the lawyer, Mike Semanchik, mentioned, who heard the gunshots in the car revving up the hill? He caught sight of the car. Based on his description, the police produced a sketch of it. It was 4 cylinders, and it was either gray or white. The line the man used about looking for his mother didn't ring true to anybody. So who was that? Someone who gets off on crime scenes? Or was that a killer returning to the scene of the crime? Even if they weren't there, many in the Cambodian community never bought the mugging theory. There's no way Ngor would have put up a fight for a chain and pendant, they say. He could have reproduced it. And Ngor was street smart. He spent 4 years deceiving the Khmer Rouge in their fundamentalist communist mindset. Had they known he was a doctor, a member of the bourgeois, it would have meant almost certain execution. But he successfully hid the fact that he was an educated man, even during torture. With that type of cunning, they say, Ngor would have been far too savvy to put up a fight in a mugging. Something else about Ngor's car doesn't make sense. The first male voice you'll hear is Doug. You don't have to kill someone to chain snatch, right?
Yeah, it does seem really strange to kill somebody to steal a locket or a watch. It's pointing a gun at somebody should suffice.
Yeah, and even in a struggle, if he was still seated in his car, maybe with his seatbelt on, or you're 3 young dudes, you don't need to shoot someone to subdue them. They were above and over him. He was seated in a car.
Yeah. That's, again, it's another thing that, to me, suggests this is a planned it's assassination. That's what it is.
Or contract killing.
Or contract killing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I say assassination, I don't mean that I think that the Khmer Rouge came here and assassinated him. I mean that either a business partner came over and shot and killed him, or hired somebody to shoot and kill him.
After we left the crime scene, Semanchik, Doug, and I went to lunch and kept talking. It just seems strange to me, like, in America, innocent until proven guilty, the burden of proof is on the prosecution. There's no fingerprints. There's no DNA evidence. They have shell casings. There's a suggestion that it was a mugging gone wrong, but the necklace was never found and the Rolex was never found. And so there's an entire absence of evidence. So that does not strike me as the American way to have a criminal trial.
No, I mean, I think you're right. I think at this case it was more who can tell a better story. What you did have from the prosecution side was the boys' proximity to the crime scene sometime after the crime, and they've got these 3 individuals that were in the area, lived in the area, and they had done robberies in the area as well. And, so I think they looked at this as a robbery. Just another robbery. Let's pick up the usual suspects.
Ngor's life was an extraordinary roller coaster, from tragedy to stardom and renewed hope to tragedy again. In the 1990s, Cambodia was emerging from decades of war. It was a chaotic, lawless, Wild West moment in history that brought me there for the first time and Haing Ngor back to his country. He wanted to do humanitarian work and he wanted to invest, maybe even get into politics. After walking through the crime scene, I agree with Semanchik. This came down to who tells a better story. After that meeting, Semanchik knew I was serious about trying to solve this murder. Since then, I've been working in collaboration with the Innocence Center, Semanchik and his research consultant, who goes by Frank. As for Ngor's story, I'm the one who's going to tell it. And next time, I bring flowers. My thanks to actor Josh Caradong, who voiced Jason Chan's texts. If you want to share comments or any details you'd like to add to the investigation, hit me up at whokilledhaingnor@gmail.com. Who the Khmer Rouge were is central to Ngor's story. Next week, I debunk the conspiracy theory that says they killed him. My name is Patricia Nunan, and this is Who Killed Haing Ngor.